Good afternoon, everybody. It's Wednesday, the 10th of March, 12 p.m. here in Melbourne. Hi, Ken. Good afternoon.
Hi, David. Nice to be here.
Great. Well, welcome to Conversations with Thought Leaders, a platform we've created to link community with inspirational people. Myself, I'm David Webley from Granite Consulting, as well as Conversations with Thought Leaders. The war for talent certainly back in full swing. Organisations are busier than ever before, working out how to attract and retain the best talent. What does the new world look like? Post-pandemic soon, hopefully. Feel free to get in touch with us if you want to talk about trends or indeed, career opportunities. So on to the show. Today I'm joined and delighted to be with Professor Ken Sloan, the Deputy Vice Chancellor and Senior Vice President Enterprise of Monash University. So a bit about Ken, for those that don't know him. He's been with Monash University for over 4 years, and he's responsible for university-wide leadership, strategic support for major partnerships, government relations, precinct development, new revenue development, commercialisation, innovation and entrepreneurship, group governance and institutional risk. And in his spare time, he's also a professor in the Department of Management in the Faculty of Business and Economics. Fair bit to keep you busy there, Ken.
Yeah, it's always funny when you hear it played back. You wonder how you fit it into the week, but there's always people who are busier than me.
Fantastic. And prior to Monash University, Ken was the Chief Operating Officer for Warwick University in the UK. Prior to that, he was a Global Director with the international services firm Serco, and also Associate Dean and Advisor to the Stephen A. Schwarzman Education Foundation based in Beijing, China. He's chaired and serves on numerous boards and fundraising trusts. Currently, he's on the board of BioCurate, and he's the chair of the Victorian Heart Institute Strategic Advisory Board. So we're delighted to be discussing leadership through adversity with Professor Ken Sloan today. Could you share a bit of your backstory, please, Ken, for those who may not know you already?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I grew up in a place called Wallasey, which most people wouldn't know about, but is a little town outside Liverpool in the United Kingdom. Went to university in Glasgow in Scotland. Spent some of my university time in New York State, upstate in New York, which was great. And then eventually left, went to live and settle in Birmingham and Coventry. And started initially in accountancy, didn't really settle into accountancy, so moved into the university sector and had a fairly broad general management and leadership career there. And as you say, left to join Serco for a couple of years and then moved back into the university sector. And also from that point, I had an opportunity to go to China before I moved over to Australia. And that was fascinating as well. So interesting life in lots of different parts of the UK and different parts of the world.
And I think from memory, you did an arts degree to start with before going into accountancy, didn't you? Was it an English degree?
Yeah, I did an English degree. I mean, Glasgow had a fairly broad curriculum, so used to do a combination of arts with some social sciences and some other things, but ultimately I specialised in English language and literature.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did an English degree myself, but then I guess how did you find on reflection doing an arts-based degree and then moving to accountancy and economic type activities, did that sort of give you a bit more of a balanced view perhaps?
I think so. I think the two things it did was, because I hadn't done accountancy before, I had to learn it from scratch, and therefore you apply yourself fully to it. And interestingly then, a lot of companies would preference arts graduates over accountancy graduates because they brought a broad set of skills, which I would argue is still really valuable in the world of work now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having that sort of balanced mindset, and a lot of companies deliberately hire people from different educational environments, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I mean, different people, the experience they've had at university is broadly similar in standard, but every university has a different approach to how it applies its education. So if you've got a diverse workforce, both in terms of the education they have and also gender, race, sexuality, etc., you're going to get a diversity of thought, which is obviously helpful for every organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what were your motivations and some of your impressions, you know, moving from Australia, from the UK to Australia via China? How did all that come about?
So in all honesty, the motivation for moving to Australia was initially a personal one, that my partner Dan had moved over to Australia 5 years beforehand. And so we got used to being on either side of the world, and ultimately made the decision that Australia was where we were going to land. Yeah. When I left Warwick, I originally planned to take 6 months off before I came over to Australia to start looking for a job. And but the opportunity through the Schwarzman Scholars Program came to go to Beijing and to Tsinghua University in Beijing. And that was great. It was a brand new international program. The thing about China was I'd been to China a lot, but I'd never worked there. So I didn't know how to actually lead a Chinese team in terms of work. And the other thing I had was I didn't have any Chinese language as well. So really had to find some allies in the country to help me to work and learn how to work. But it was great. I really got to understand much more about Chinese culture and Chinese working ethics, and obviously made some great friends. In terms of Australia, the thing I would say is it would be very easy to fall into the trap of saying that we've got the same language, so we've got the same history. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Australia has got similar language to the UK, but often uses the words very differently to how the UK would use them. I found myself at times where I've used phrases in Australia which have meant the complete opposite of what I thought they meant. So that's been interesting. But also a hugely distinctive culture and a really precious history in Australia, which I think anyone who moves here really needs to spend the time to understand in order to really get to know people and thrive in this environment.
Yeah, I'm interested to know, so moving from, you know, Warwick University through to China, if we can just drill into that a bit more. Yeah. What did you have to do? I mean, I know you touched on it around finding allies and not speaking the language, but what are some of the main differences you noticed in the leadership styles, and how were you effective in that environment?
So I think I'd got so used to people being able to read cues in the UK. So there's a lot of unsaid cues. There's verbal cues, there's visual cues you can give to people. There's certain words you can use in your, if you're running a program group or a project group, there's certain things you can say, and you know that when you come back together, certain things will have happened. I remember one particular time in China where I was listing off a series of tasks that needed to be done, because we were working under a lot of pressure because the college was going to open within a couple of weeks. What I hadn't done was made it explicit that the tasks were for each individual around the table. So I went away thinking that all these things were being done. And what happened in practice was people thought I'd given them a long list of things that I was going to do. So I suddenly realized that in order to engage properly, I had to be much clearer in what I wanted. I also needed to be much more explicit in what I said. But it didn't, eventually someone took me to one side and said, if you want something done, you need to firstly say what you want done, who needs to do it, and when you want it done by. And once that happened, it became a lot easier.
Yeah, so really starting up as sort of a university and starting up a business, I guess similar processes, but something to pick up on there. I mean, I've done a lot of work throughout the region, and you know, you quite often see there's a more hierarchical nature with management and leadership in businesses. And would you find that in the education environment in China as well?
Yeah, you would. There's a huge amount of respect between different levels of management, and as I said before, the really important thing is if you're going to fit in, and it's important that you need to know that you need to fit in. It's their environment. It's a different culture, and you really do need to understand the differences. So here I sit today without a tie on. In the vast majority of Chinese meetings, they don't wear ties, except in particular settings, or if there are particular people in the room. If there are senior politicians in the room, or there are senior people from the university, it would be unusual not to dress more formally. You need to understand that in order to both settle in well, but also for your role and your place to be accepted.
So do you think there's more of a deferential treatment between students and professors? And do you think that's what, I know we're going to come to, you know, the elephant in the room at some point, I'm sure, about, you know, international students in Australia, and obviously the pandemic's been challenging for so many sectors. But do you think that's one of the reasons why more of a perhaps a collegiate environment in the US, the UK, or Australia is attractive, perhaps?
I think the main reason it's attractive is because people want to get an international perspective on both their education and also their prospects for the future. There are some systems of education where the use of lectures is much more prominent. So, and lectures tend to be fairly, in some systems, they tend to be fairly passive. You have someone who delivers content, and you have people who listen to it. What I saw when I was at Tsinghua University was a really significant investment in what we would call collegiate, collaborative, discursive education. And the new college was a really good example of that, where instead of just simply showing deference to an academic at the front of the room, there was a real attempt to engage the learners and to reverse the teaching and learning cycle so that the learners were actively participating and also actively curating the education experience that they were getting. But it is absolutely true to say in some systems that's a new thing. And the more we can mix up the populations, the better it is to be able to share different types of learning and teaching.
I've certainly noticed in corporates, and I think it's one of their best examples was Lloyd's of London, which is probably about as old school as an insurance institution as you can get. The concept of reverse mentoring. And I remember there was a piece I was reading with a few of their execs talking about getting basically entry-level underwriters who understand, you know, social media and the new way of working to reverse mentor people who are at different, you know, latter stages of their careers.
Yeah, and that's something I've actively encouraged. I gave a talk in Melbourne a couple of years ago, and we were talking about mentoring relationships. And I think people were expecting me to get up and talk about the people I had mentored. And actually, I told the story of a 25-year-old mentor that I had. And I just said that I may be 48 years old, but I do not know now what it feels like to see the world through the eyes of a 20-year-old, a 25-year-old. And it's been really beneficial to me to have access to someone who can challenge me, challenge my own perceptions, because in any leadership role, we are trying to create the environment where the people can succeed and thrive. And the only way to do that is by having insight into what it is that drives them, what it is that motivates them, how are they going to be productive. And if I think back to a Warwick example, I remember a member of staff approaching me. They'd been at the university for 3 years, and then they came to talk to me about wanting a career break. And you know, my initial reaction was, you've been here for 3 years and you want a career break. And some of my other colleagues who might have been even more traditionally focused than I was said, surely a career break is your retirement that comes at the end. And but actually, this was the structure that people wanted. They wanted to do 3 to 5 years of work. They wanted to go off and broaden their horizons and come back. And as an employer, you've got a choice. Do you embrace that and embrace the learning that people bring back? Or do you stay with a more traditional model and potentially pass on that talent to someone else? And we decided we needed to be flexible.